Hi, everybody. George Donnelly here. This is the More Liberty Now something. I'm here tonight with Joel Anthony Williamson and Jonathan Baird. How are you guys doing tonight?
I'm doing well.
I'm doing
Excellent.
great also. How are you, George?
Doing great. Doing great. Congratulations on your wedding, Joel.
Thank you. It happened.
The sign of the slave.
You get to say that now that you're not a married man anymore, huh?
Well, technically, still, but
Oh, okay. Well,
but yeah,
single-ish.
for all practical intents and purposes. Hey, Joel, I think you have maybe the audio is not going to your headphones. There's a little bit of an echo coming from you. Maybe you could check on that. Yeah, we lost your audio now. Testing.
Can you?
No, it's still coming through. Or could it be you, Jonathan? I don't think so, though.
It's possible it's me. Let me. I don't have a headphone on, so maybe I need to put some headphones on.
Yeah, that'll definitely help. Yeah, it might
Okay,
not be
hold
you,
on just
Joel.
one
Sorry.
second.
Okay. Because I thought I had it set up the way I always did.
Well, anyway, our topic this evening is the basic income guarantee, which, let's see, I'm going to mute Jonathan. Testing. Yeah, it was Jonathan. Jonathan, I muted you, sorry. So yeah, tonight our topic is the basic income guarantee, which is basically the idea that people, whether they work or not, no matter their socioeconomic level, whatever, they should get some money, ideally from the government or some other public institution, every year on a regular basis, enough to allow them to overcome the poverty, level to, just basically survive. Whether they work or not, whether they're means tested or not, there are different proposals. But the basic idea is that people get this money and they can do whatever they like. Hold on.
You unmuting him now?
I'm trying, yeah.
That's cool.
It's funny, it won't let me unmute him now.
Maybe he's muted himself?
No. Let's see. That's so strange. It shows muted, but it doesn't let me unmute. Hmm. No. Jonathan, my apologies. I muted you, and it doesn't let me unmute you for some reason. Can you disconnect and reconnect? Maybe that'll do it. Thanks. Buddy. So
I can hear him
on
now.
the basic
I just heard
income
him.
guarantee. Oh, you heard him.
I heard something as he walked away.
I still show him muted here. But anyway, I'm just gonna let him. I don't know if he heard me, so.
Oh,
Oh, all right, Jonathan, come on back. So anyway, Joel, what do you think about the basic income?
The basic income. So it's basically an attempt to solve socioeconomic inequality, right?
Yes.
That's all it really comes down to, which I guess is a noble goal. But if your attempt to solve that socioeconomic inequality contradicts the idea of the equality of authority, which I think is at the heart of libertarianism, then you have to recognize that as a morally inconsistent way to achieve those ends and should be thrown out altogether.
Mm-hmm. But in general, do you like the idea? Do you think that, if it could be done justly, that that it would be a good idea?
Well, the only way that it could be done justly, I think, would be in a truly freed market, which means it would be done without centralized coercion. And really, if we are concerned with this sort of thing, we should cut at the roots of the problem and not hack at its branches. So I think socioeconomic inequality is largely created because of the state, and it's created by the state. So you eliminate the state, and you get something closer to socioeconomic equality. And I think the real question is, or the more relevant question to us as a community would be how to eliminate the state.
I hear you. Hey, Jonathan, welcome back. Can you hear me?
I'm back. Yes, I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yes, can hear you fine.
Good.
Sorry about that.
No problem. It was my fault.
Yeah, but I hear you, Joel. It's better to solve it with market forces, voluntary action outside of the state. And I think that makes a lot of sense. In general, I kind of like the idea. I think that a lot of people suffer because they're worried about money. They're worried about just making ends meet, and their kids, not having enough food to eat or decent food, or them getting kicked out of their apartment or having to live out of a car or out on the street or out in a shelter. And so for that reason, I kind of like the idea in general. What do you think, Jonathan, about the basic income?
There 50% of the nation is on some kind of government assistance right now. And if we look at the amount of money spent on every kind of government assistance, from welfare to Social Security, it makes somewhat sense to do that if you cut out every other form of welfare and give a basic income, and then have nothing else, to no other form of welfare. But that's not what's going to happen. They're going to put a new little bits of welfare in there, on top of it. So basically, I'm against it, but I understand it as as an idea. I understand why it would be tempting, but it's completely wrong. I mean, there's nothing. If we do it, it will collapse the system. Although collapsing the system would be a great idea, I don't think Cloward Piven would pan out the way that the left thinks it would.
Yeah, I've engaged a little bit with the folks at the Basic Income subreddit recently, because I do like this idea, but all the proposals I read come back to taxation. Some of the most notable proposals are a negative income tax, like what Milton Friedman proposed. Another economist proposed a 14% value-added tax that looks like at the federal level. And generally it boils... and someone else has proposed printing more money, at the Federal Reserve level to make up any deficits. And so I think it all boils down to taxation. And I said in that subreddit, I said, well, why don't we try to do a voluntary scheme, that doesn't depend on printing money and taxation. Let's treat it as a startup. Let's raise some money. Let's buy some companies, and we'll use the dividends to start funding it. And I was immediately, of course, downvoted severely. So,
sure. Well, what do you mean by that exactly? I don't know that I'm following you fully.
Well, if you do it through the government, there's so many risks involved there. Not just the fact that they're going to raise taxes or inflation or whatever, but also that they could steal. The government, they a lot of the money that goes through there gets lost in administrative fees, as they pay bureaucrats to push paper around. And so, how about a basic income that doesn't go through the government, that goes through a foundation, a private foundation, or a corporation where the people own shares of? And what if you could kickstart it, for example, and raise, I don't know, $10 or $100 million. It's not that much money, really. But, get it started. And you could buy assets with that money. You could invest it in assets. You could treat it like the endowment of a college, of a university. and then or a stock portfolio, and over time you invest it or you buy companies or whatever, and the profit distributions, a certain percentage of that gets distributed to people. There have to be some parameters, couldn't be unlimited, but it gets distributed to people as a basic income.
I think I follow you now. I mean, and morally, obviously, I wouldn't be opposed to that if it were done on a voluntary basis. I'm trying to understand that sort of in like a revolutionary sort of frame. I'm sort of trying to understand how that specifically could help the market ends that we want to see come to fruition.
Mm-hmm.
How is that a step closer towards anarchy? What does that do to?
No, I don't. I'm not sure that it really does much, because I don't think that. I think that overall basic income would create a dependent class of people. So I'm not sure that it would advance an agorist revolution, for example, any further than any act of giving the public what it wants. The giving customers what they want. I just think that it could be a proposal like that could be a way of kind of pushing the current basic income fervor in a more market-oriented direction, so that it doesn't, to kind of retard its progress, because right now it's just turning into another big government program, it's kind of like a cool new government program, just kind of
Right.
getting its start. And at some point, it's going to become something serious. 25 years ago, they talked about socialized medicine, and it was roundly rejected. Today, we sort of have something like that. Today, basic income is kind of cool, although a lot of people reject it. And so in 15, 20 years, it could become a reality.
I think the problem with your scheme is that you're going to be competing with the government, and the government doesn't like competition. And for instance, you've seen this week the people trying to feed the homeless in Florida being arrested. The government does not like that kind of competition, and I think that they would do everything they could in their power to stop you. And so I don't think in the long run that it would actually work, because I think something would be done to muscle you out of the welfare business.
He probably has a point there, and I think what is unique and important about agorism, throwing that in there again, I'm always going to talk about it. I think it's like at the forefront of how to get from here to there. But I think what's unique about agorism is that the competition that agorists are interested in aren't in overt competition with the government, rather covert with it. And real quick, what was George? Not you. Jonathan is your name, right?
Yes.
Jonathan, sorry about that. I think that, I was watching a YouTube video of this dude who was talking about the idea of basic income, and he gave a couple studies of where it's happened in other countries. I can't remember, I think somewhere in Africa, but it actually did work out. Like, it was fruitful, to some extent. And I think these kind of things are possible, and I think they can be good in the long run. But just like any other government program, it's only going to maintain the state's existence in the long run. I think we should be concerned with not reforming the state, but getting rid of it, or replacing it, rather.
Well, on the basic income subreddit, where they're really organized about this stuff, they have a whole raft of studies done in mostly in the third world about this that have shown positive uptake, like one positive results, like one in India where they did a pilot project.
Not Africa. Yeah, it's India.
Okay, and basically these dirt poor people, they distributed money mostly, if I remember correctly, mostly to women, and the people invested it in projects, and I think that has a lot of potential there, because those people are, I think generally speaking, pretty responsible with money. And the things that they can do to build businesses, like you see this on the social lending sites like Kiva or whatever, the things they can do to earn more money are pretty simplistic. Like buying some chickens, and selling the eggs, or getting a sewing machine to set up a seamstress business. But I was reading a New York Times article, actually, I think it was from last year, about the basic income was a big deal in the 70s. And Nixon even proposed it. And it would have even passed, except Democrats didn't support it because it wasn't liberal enough for them. And they ran some studies, and even Daniel Patrick Moynihan, a senator at the time, and he was well known for being very, very liberal and very interested in, helping the common man and whatnot. He even concluded from the studies run in the United States on this topic that it led to people dropping out of the workforce, not working, and he didn't see a positive future for that. Now, if Daniel Patrick Moynihan doesn't see a popular future for the basic income, I don't know who's left, to support it of any credibility, because that guy had super credibility on the topic of social safety nets.
Yeah.
The problem with a social safety net of this type is that it may culturally work in India. It's not probably going to work culturally in the United States. We don't have the kind of culture that, if I suddenly get $10,000 extra a year, I'm probably going to spend it on a big screen TV and rather than go buy some chickens. Not myself, because I actually have chickens, but there are millions of people in this country that just think it's free money, and they're not going to go out and try to better themselves with the money. We see that with welfare every day. I mean, there are lots of people in this country that get free money and do nothing with it. And I don't think culturally we have an underclass that can understand that kind of, here's something free. I think it's more of the don't feed the bears mentality, because the bear will come back and, steal your lunch. I mean, it's
That's what was so surprising about that India study, is it was like very close and personal, and they weren't just like asking people, well, did you spend less on alcohol? Did you, spend it on things you're supposed to spend it on? They were actually there up close and personal with them, and for one way or another were able to prove that they were spending it on things that were fruitful, which I think is, an anomaly, really. I mean, like you said, Jonathan, you would think that people would use it to, on vices, but this, what it was is like, it was like an 18-year long study. It showed that, like, overall people didn't do that. And I'm not disagreeing with you, Jonathan. I think it's a horrible idea, but this was, I don't know, that sort of flies in the face of what we think would happen in America.
I think it's cultural, though. I think that at a basic level in India, that these people have worked so hard for so long that they don't think, I'm just going to go out and spend it on something frivolous, and they end up spending it on, like, if this was done in the 1930s in America, it might work. But done in 2014 in America, I don't think it would work.
So some folks say that technological unemployment is either here or going to be here soon due to robots and software automating a lot of work. And, for example, there was an IO9 piece from October 31st, and it was kind of scary and alarmist, so it was a good day to publish it, I guess, in which they said it's either basic income or societal collapse, And basic income people cite Thomas Paine, Martin Luther King, Napoleon, Hayek, Milton Friedman, Charles Murray, and others in support of the basic income. So I really think that there is there's a sizable consensus being built behind this idea. How do we stop it?
Don't stop it.
What's our best argument?
Don't stop it. Let them do it. Let the state blow up itself. I mean, I don't think we should be concerned with making the state more comfortable at all. And that's ultimately what that does, I think. If people are going to be handed free money, maybe I think that people are going to be more complacent and less likely to want to evolve past centralized coercion that is government. So I say let them do it. Let them enact all the bad policies they can, actually.
I'm going to have to agree with Joel 100%. I think the only way to get rid of the government as it is right now is to collapse it from within. I think everyone in the country should go out and get a student loan. I think everyone should go out and go back to school and take as much money out of the government as they possibly can to collapse it, because the left thinks Cloward pivot is going to happen. That they base this on Watts riots in the 60s, that if the government collapses and the government isn't there to pay for things, that people are just going to go insane. But using Watts in the 60s as an example of what's going to happen to America, it's just not true, because people will form their own small communities if the government disappears. If the government disappears tomorrow, it won't affect me all that much, other than keeping a lot of the money that I make.
I think this attitude, though, of, let's crash the government, I think it's reckless. And because a lot of people can suffer in the meantime. And I think it's naive, too, because I think the governments have shown in the past that when they run out of money, they print more, they devalue the currency, they steal pensions. And, what comes to mind is, wheelbarrows full of cash in Weimar Germany to buy a loaf of bread. And so on the one hand, I think I don't think it's a good idea. And on the other hand, I think it makes us, if libertarians or whoever is going to advocate for that idea, I think it makes us look like we don't care what happens to other people. And so then people say, oh, those wacko libertarians, they don't care. They just want to turn everything into nuclear dust. They just want to say, screw everybody, bring the system down, whatever cost. And so that is a little shoehorn to wedge us out of any kind of mainstream debate, about these kinds of ideas.
Well, George, I think your speech that you just gave then would have been a perfect speech in 1776 in England. That's exactly what politicians were saying then. Those Americans, they're reckless. This is reckless what they're doing. They don't care about the common people. Our government is protecting the common people with the taxes. And the revolution is coming. So if it happens sooner, it's going to be better. Sooner or later, this government will collapse. It's better to be sooner than later.
I feel you, George. It does make us seem heartless in a way. And I had a friend recently go on, or we were at Brave New Books, and he was criticizing the anarchists who were against voting. And he was like, well, tell that to someone in a marginalized community of lower income who smokes weed and gets locked up, as opposed to, any of us white privileged people in, suburbia who are less likely for that to happen. How are you going to say that person is doing wrong by voting to legalize marijuana? And so I guess I'll just make an analogy there. To not support that, right, seems heartless. But I think to support it is heartless in the long run, because it's only going to further that person's subjugation in the long run. So in the short run, yes, we can have, along the way, we can make things more comfortable. But in the long run, if we're enacting these things that are putting people in a position again to get more I think it ultimately makes them more, it cozies up the state. It makes them less likely to want to build alternatives to evolve past it, and no reason to get rid of it either.
Yeah, it's a shame you missed. We had a conversation. It might have been last week about voting, in which I basically argued that maybe we should be engaging with the state on certain things. Because look at the progress, like marijuana in Colorado, and how there was a proposal in California that passed. That's going to result in fewer crime, in actually tens of thousands of people being released from prison.
Yeah.
And also in let's see, in fewer crimes being considered serious felonies in the future. And so you have to, like, I think that in the past I have taken a very hardline kind of radical position, very similar to what you're saying, Joel. But when I see stuff like this, and also Jonathan was recently elected to a significant position in the state of North Carolina, so he's a big proponent of voting.
I am. I'm a minarchist, not an anarchist. So.
Yeah. And so, like, it's easy. I think it's easy. It's very easy to take that position, like, of hard line. It's got to be this way. It's better in the long run. But in the meantime, if that means our voices are cut out of the debate, as irrelevant, and as the libertarian philosophical ecosystem is airless and inflexible, then what are we doing? Are we just shining, the diamond that's never gonna, come out of the mines?
Well, we're going to be called those things by the two parties, whether it's true or not. Whether we are heartless bastards or not, the Democrats are going to say, those are the heartless bastards that believe in Ayn Rand. And then the Republicans are going to say, those are the heartless bastards that want drugs on the street. So it doesn't matter what we actually support or do. We're going to be called those things. We have to win hearts and minds one individual at a time. And that's where we're at. We're never going to get the masses. We're never going to have the media presence that the Democrats have, or the media, or the money that the Republicans have. It's not going to happen. Well, we might have enough people to collapse the government and build something new.
Yeah, I just think that if America has proven anything, it's that small governments turn into big ones. And that if we are successful in peeling back these restrictive laws, there's no guarantee that they'll stay that way, right? There's no guarantee that that it'll ever be repealed. So recognizing that all we have is time, money, and energy to dedicate towards the libertarian world that we want to see, do we want to continue climbing this uphill battle that trusts other people with our lives, and again, in the long run, seems to me to be counter to the world we want to see because of the reasons I mentioned. Does that make sense?
I mean, I totally understand your position. Yeah. Hey, we have a question or a comment from Emberlea. I hope I pronounced that right. She says, I have to disagree with Jonathan that people in the U.S. are culturally inept. Excuse me, and unable to take a living wage or basic income and use it to make their lives better. Many people on welfare or public assistance are on there for a short time or are so far below the socioeconomic ladder that demonizing them is elitist. Plus, feeding the homeless is a good thing, not a bad thing. I think each of you are coming at these issues from a middle-class elitist background and are not taking into account the whole of the system. And yes, libertarians can be very uncaring.
Let me say that.
Wait, I think I can sum up her comment in 3 words. Check your privilege. Go ahead, John.
Let me say this. I reside and grew up in southern Appalachian Mountains. I come from nothing, had nothing. My parents have something now. My parents became moderately wealthy after I went to college. But growing up, I am the last person that should be told to check my privilege because I live in the most depressed, poor, and socially backward part of the United States. And everyone shits on us. I'm sorry if I'm not supposed to cuss on your podcast or not. But everyone... Well, every demographic in this country shits on the Southern Appalachian hillbilly. And being a hillbilly, I can tell you this. When I say I see people out there that get on welfare and do nothing with it, I have seen people get on welfare and do nothing with it. If it wasn't true, why would 47% of this nation be taking money from the government right now? If we were all getting off that government teat, 47, it wouldn't be increasing year by year. because it becomes easier and easier to get that money. And I would say it's higher than 47% because I don't think Social Security is in that social that I think people don't count that as welfare, which it definitely is welfare.
I think checking your privilege is a good thing every now and then. I think we're afraid of that. We sort of push that to the side as if only social anarchists are the ones who have a monopoly on that saying. But I think checking your privilege is a natural thing that any humble person should do. So anytime someone wants to tell me to do that or thinks that I should, I'm going to take that opportunity to reflect on the ways that I have benefited from being white or being brought up in a home where I had both parents. So consider my privilege checked as far as that goes. But I still hold to the fact that basic income, in the long run, from an anarchist perspective, is a bad idea. And I know this is slightly different from Jonathan. I'm not rejecting it because I think that people shouldn't have it. I'm rejecting it because I think that in the long run, from an anarchist perspective, I think it's a bad idea.
Well, I'm not rejecting it because I think people shouldn't have it. I'm rejecting it because I think it will demotivate people. That our culture is not one that motivates itself with when it's given an easy way out.
So Matt Zwolinski, who's a libertarian academic, he posts on the Bleeding Heart Libertarians website. Let's see, almost a year ago, he wrote an article called "The Libertarian Case for a Basic Income." And one of the most interesting and, provocative arguments, he said, one of libertarians' most distinctive commitments is its belief in the near inviolability of private property rights. But it does not follow from this commitment that the existing distribution of property rights ought to be regarded as inviolable, because the existing distribution is in many ways the product of past acts of uncompensated theft and violence. However attractive libertarianism might be in theory, libertarianism starting now has the ring of special pleading, especially when it comes from the mouths of people who have by and large emerged at the top of the bloody and murderous mess that is our collective history. And basically he argues that because, we were born into a world and we didn't get our 1/7 billionth share of the Earth's surface and riches, that we deserve reparations. I think he actually uses the word reparations, and that basic income is a way of providing reparations for that from that loss. What do you guys think about that?
Kind of reminds me of Robin Hood. Right, there's sort of the left and the right's understanding of it, which is the nanny state, the statist left, I'll say, understanding of Robin Hood. The story goes, well, the rich are rich and are greedy, so we need to steal from them and give to the poor, providing them basic income so we can have socioeconomic equality. And then the right story of it is those people are rich because they got it voluntarily. Don't steal from them. If you're poor, it's your fault. And actually, both of those are inaccurate. We all know that Robin Hood was taking back what was originally stolen from the producing class, right? So I think that's his point here, is that it doesn't actually contradict any libertarian ethics because it wasn't theirs to begin with. So through government privilege, corporate domination is possible. Through government privilege, a ruling class is made possible. So absent the parasite that is government, you would see corporate domination, the ruling class, socioeconomic inequality evaporate. It would be vastly different from what we see nowadays.
So you think that such reparations would be legitimate?
In a sense. I guess it depends on how it goes about, how we go about doing that. But
But could you imagine like invalidating every property title in the world and being like, okay, we're gonna set up a constituent assembly and like reapportion everything? Can you imagine like
that would
the
be
chaos?
Yeah, that sounds like chaos to me. I know I
The
couldn't
problem
imagine
is,
that.
where do you stop? I mean, do you give back the United States to the Native Americans? Who are the Native Americans? Do you give back Scotland to the Scots? Do you give back Ireland to the Scots because the Irish came in and pushed the Scots into Scotland? I mean, where do you stop? You've got to say, this is our baseline. There are no reparations of these things further back. I mean, some of these corporations have been in existence 200, 300 years. Do we go back that far, looking at where they stole from the people they stole from them? I don't know. I hate I'm a pragmatic libertarian, and I don't think this is a pragmatic solution. I think
Well, and
it's
also, if you
Go ahead.
don't redistribute a little bit, let's say that tomorrow there's a revolution and or an evolution and no more government, just all anarchism and private voluntary mutual associations and all that business. Well, Texaco, let's say Texaco is still in business, and Texaco gets together with Walmart or Monsanto, and they're like, we're going to keep our business going the way we want, and screw you guys, and don't you dare touch our stuff. Well, that's an immense amount of power that could displace, the new voluntary order. So, wouldn't you need to do a little bit of redistribution there in order to avoid an even worse situation coming about? Like a corporate fascist kind of a situation?
Well, my answer is going to be there can never be an agorist society, and there can never be an anarchist society. That it won't work. There will always be what you will get if we have an anarchist society. What we will get is a return to a feudal society. We'll have feudal corporate lords and peasants again. And I know that you two don't agree with that, but I think that we have to have an agreement between the people, and that the people have to override the corporations and override the anarchists within society.
But that's exactly what I'm talking about. If you go into that situation, if you get rid of the government and it's just the people and these big corporations, then if you don't do anything about that corporate power, wouldn't you have that feudal situation? And so, feudal or fascistic, whatever you want to call it.
Right.
And so wouldn't you need to to like cut those corporations down to size? What do you think, Joe?
Maybe not through statist means. I mean, I think what you're talking about is, Rothbard's red button where the state doesn't exist tomorrow. I don't think that there's going to be like one day where something explodes and the government just doesn't exist anymore. I hold fast to the idea that there will be market institutions that people can voluntarily opt into, and eventually individually and collectively secede from it. So I see corporate power and corporate domination reducing basically as the agora gets stronger also. So, and Jonathan, before I convince you of market or agorism, I have to convince you of market anarchism. So this isn't directly to you. But to answer your question, George, directly, I think that the doomsday scenario where it's just going to explode one day and we will have nothing but corporate power left is false. I think that with conscious effort we can avoid that through, again, individual and collective secession, creating these market institutions that people can opt into. And some would say, like we've said on past podcasts, that it's an opt-out to call it a multi-generational goal, but I still think that it's a multi-generational goal, if not the next generation. But I don't know. I'm not so positive that we would see this evolution happen in our lifetime. Not to cop out from it and to get rid of my responsibility in all of this, but I do think it's a multi-generational thing.
So basically, I think, Joel, what you're saying is that it wouldn't be an immediate changeover, and as people join the private voluntary mutual organizations, that they would kind of equally take power away from both government and corporations at the same time, so that perhaps neither one at any point would be able to gain such an advantage as to unbalance things before, kind of like the final changeover or whatever, if you want to call it that. Does that sound right?
I think so. I mean, it's all about not just reducing your dependency on government, but also reducing your dependency on the white market, which is the legal, tax, and regulated market that these corporations exist in.
Mm-hmm. So on that topic, Jonathan, you were saying that you're convinced that at some point the government is going to just collapse. It may be a quick thing, maybe a slow thing. And that's kind of orthodoxy a little bit among a lot of libertarians, that the collapse is coming. Some kind of collapse is coming. It's going to happen, and then things are going to get better. And I don't actually believe that. I don't think the government's going to collapse. I think they're going to hang on for dear life. I think they have all the tools to do it. I think that the Weimar Germany, that kind of a situation, they can avoid that, because they have the compliance of a large percent of the population. They just keep devaluing or changing currencies or whatever, start things over. And then you got another 100 years, or more until the currency reaches a critical situation. And, I think as long as you have the compliance of such a large part of the population, the government will be able to keep collapse at bay. And I think they're going to keep having that compliance until such time as basic living standards were to deteriorate, because as long as people are comfortable, they're going to be happy with things, generally speaking.
Well, I think that 20 or 30 years before the collapse of Rome, a Roman citizen would have said the same thing you said. It's never going away. Rome is the eternal city. It's never going to go away. But it did. All governments collapse sooner or later. Our government will not last another 100 years. I can't imagine it. I don't think it's going to collapse completely and the government disappears tomorrow. I think what will happen is the federal government may overreach at some point, and parts of the country start to break away.
And what about the British government, though? I don't think it's ever collapsed, and they've probably been going for at least
they've been going
1,000 years. I mean,
well, if you look at the turnover of kings, I mean, certainly you could say that there's no fixed monarchy from that 1,000 years. The Stuarts are certainly not the Tudors, and the Tudors are not the Plantagenets.
But the monarchy has been going for a long, long time.
Monarchy has been going for a long, long time, but
I'm not prepared to wait that long.
The system of government. For instance, Cromwell, that is a completely different system of government than the monarchy had. The system of government in Britain has changed over at least 4 times, the type of government, from monarchy to religious, just basically a theological monarchy, to the modern, not really a monarchy, what we have there now, I forget what it's called, constitutional monarchy. That's not the same government, even though it seems like a government throughout time. It's very different. British citizens had a lot more rights in the 19th century than they had in the 17th century. But
it's not like it collapsed. I mean, they passed the baton. One ruling family may have gone out, but another one came right in and picked up where they left off. And they may have pulled more and more power out of the monarchy, but it was still wasn't a collapse. It was a fairly peaceful transition kind of a thing.
Well, Washington, D.C. may exist in 1,000 years as Washington, D.C., but North Carolina may be its own country, like India is its own country today. It is no longer part of the British Empire. Or Ireland is no longer part of the British Empire. So a government may last for 1,000 years, but it's certainly not going to maintain its power for 1,000 years.
I don't know. You're kind of backtracking from your claim now, though. You said every government collapses.
I still claim that their government is not the same government as it was. So, and it certainly has collapsed in the last, you know, Rome still exists. I mean, they could make a claim that the Pope is a continuation of, you know, the Roman Empire, or of course the Habsburgs claim they were a continuation of the Holy Roman Empire.
What do you think about this stuff, Joel?
Well, yeah, I guess it is sort of mainstream, or the mainstream thought in libertarianism is that either it's going to collapse, or the agorist idea that we could evolve past it, or the minarchist idea, which Jonathan seems to be a fusion between, is that the federal government will collapse and then we can finally reduce government to its appropriate size, which is sort of a minarchist state. Which, by the way, Jonathan, I don't know if you know this, but Samuel Edward Konkin III coined that term, minarchist.
I know, and it was to be used as an insult, but I don't take it as an insult.
Right. Well, I mean, he just coined it to be what it accurately is. Someone who believes in small government. I don't know that it was supposed to be an insult, but anyways, my question is, Jonathan, like, what would you do? And let's say, you know, it does pan out to where the federal government does collapse, and maybe then we see sort of state power reign more. If you were president of one of these states, what would you do to someone who didn't pay their taxes?
Well, I have I don't believe in individual income tax. I believe that the states have enough property. I'd have to go through the whole spiel of what I think how the states did not have to enact income tax until 1913. Our country could live without an income tax with no problem.
So just sales tax?
No, not even a sales tax. We could rent land. Like, for instance, my state owns tens of thousands, actually maybe hundreds of thousands of acres of land. Much of that land is logged. However, these logging companies are paying $1 an acre to log this property instead of what the going rate would be on private property. If the state just charged logging companies what it cost logging companies to log on private property, the state would make enough money to run the bureaucracy and would not need an income tax. The same thing goes for extraction of minerals off of state property. If we fracked in North Carolina, which we don't yet, but we're probably going to start fracking soon, that money that the oil companies would pay to the state, if they paid, you know, the going rate they pay to private landowners, would pay for even more things that the state could. You know, the state is not without means. The state doesn't need my income.
But it needs some form of taxation, meaning some form of wealth taken non-voluntarily from someone else, right? And are you saying that
the natural resources?
I think, Joel, what he's saying is that the government can get enough revenue from using the state government owns a lot of land, and there are natural resources on the land like timber or whatever, and that by licensing that land or renting it out to people who exploit the land for whatever purpose, its resources or growing stuff or whatever, that the income from the exploitation of that land will pay for all the needs of the state government. I think that's what you're saying, Jonathan. Is that correct?
Yes, exactly what I'm saying. And that, of course, you would have to cut back. I mean, I don't believe in, I think that schools should be private. I think that there should be no state welfare. There should be, the state should be protecting the borders, some policing power, not the kind of policing power we have now, and maintaining the rule of law. And that's pretty much close to about everything the state should be doing. And we certainly have enough material wealth that the state owns to do those three things.
So, Joel, it sounds like Jonathan's ideal state would be pretty easy to strangle in a bathtub. So there's that.
Yeah,
if you wanted to get rid of the state, it wouldn't be too hard to get rid of the state. But I think that the state would prove itself to be worthy of not being strangled. I mean, the United States government that we had right after the Constitution, there are problems with it, but it certainly was more free than what we have now.
Okay, maybe I'm just really slow tonight, but how are we funding the state again? Through? No, I'm sorry to make yourself to repeat it, but George, you just said it to me. We're going to like rent land. What is it again?
Yeah, so
Where's the money coming from?
the state government of North Carolina owns a lot of land inside the state.
Okay.
And what they'll do is they'll say, "Hey, you want to run a business using our land? You know, you want to chop timber, you want to grow plants.
Okay.
Pay us a little bit, and then you go and do that. You know, and then so it's like they're a land like a real estate. So it's like the state of North Carolina turns into a real estate business. You know.
So okay. Well, what if they didn't pay North Carolina? What if someone wanted to take some land from, North Carolina and didn't pay?
What if someone wanted to take land from you that you owned and didn't pay?
Well, I can legitimately own property. I don't know what North Carolina is.
North Carolina is a group of people. I believe that a group of people can own property as a state just as well as a group of people can own property as a corporation.
Did they homestead that land or?
Well, are we going back to this thing where we have to?
I just think it's impossible for a state to own anything.
Give reparations.
No,
well, I don't believe it's impossible for a state to own things. So.
Well, wait. Let's get back to the collapse topic.
Anarchist, and I'm not.
Let's get back to the collapse topic. I think that I don't know. Maybe we can all agree. I don't know. Let's hope so. I think that the collapsism in the libertarian community is a very pernicious and harmful idea because people say, oh, it's going to collapse. The dollar's going to collapse. The oil supply is going to collapse. The government's going to collapse. Collapse. And then it will be all good. We can do whatever we like, and we can have our guns, and we can give our middle fingers to the government, and libertarian paradise, yeah? But I think this is lazy thinking, because I don't think that it's going to collapse, not that easily, and it's an excuse for people to sit back and just kind of laugh at all the little bits of collapse compatible news that comes in. What do you guys think?
I think anarchists as well as minarchists do that. I think that's something that's sort of a theme within the whole of the liberty community. And I think one thing that has led people to do is to try to reform it. So if this collapse is going to come, then we might as well make it comfortable on the ride there. And that, I think, from a revolutionary agorist perspective, is a distraction. I think the collapse idea is a distraction in that way.
Well, I think that if enough people believe that there's going to be a collapse, that they'll cause it. I encourage collapse. I think that we should encourage, the left with the Cloward Piven strategy. I think that's the best strategy. I say go for it, please.
But so let's assume for a second, for the sake of a thought experiment, that it works. Everybody takes out student loans and goes on Social Security and drops litter on state park grounds or whatever, and the state collapses. Then what? If we're all sitting back here like, oh, we just gotta wait for the collapse, guys. If we're all like that, then we're not ready. And so it's a situation of chaos. And because people haven't learned about our proposals, we haven't developed them into viable businesses that are already in operation and are ready to scale, then the base prejudices of the majority of people take over. Another state is formed, and everybody's like, yeah, this state's really cool because we made it, And then, we're worse than square one. We're worse than we were before as libertarians because now there's a new state that everybody believes in, and we missed our golden chance.
Yeah,
well,
it sounds fairly dystopian. Go ahead, Jonathan.
I think that's one of the reasons I'm encouraging libertarians to enter the lower levels instead of trying to win the presidency or the Senate. that they should win every state election they can possibly get, because if it collapses, the federal government will collapse, but local government is still going to exist. For a while, at least. I don't see local government really collapsing in the same way. I mean, the federal government can collapse if they just quit paying the federal employees. But I think local people will still go to their, local government is part-time most of the time anyway. I'm not getting paid for what I'm doing. And I've got a 4-year commitment to do this, and I'm not getting paid.
But I think
so
actually
a lot of these
local and
politicians,
state governments, Jonathan, are going to collapse first if there's going to be a collapse. Look at the city of Detroit that had to declare bankruptcy. Local and state governments can't print their own money, after all, but the feds can.
They may, but states like Texas, do you really think Texas would collapse if the federal government collapsed? They may even have a plan to print their own money. I don't know. I think that the states would survive because there is a culture of survival for the states. For instance, I'm a North Carolinian, and I feel like a North Carolinian, and there's a lot of going forward where you can go forward by just believing you're this thing. America has survived because people believe in America, not because they believe in the government.
Okay, any last words, Joel?
I don't know whether or not local governments would collapse before the federal government would. Either way, tying it back around to what we're talking about as far as basic income goes, I think that's a Whoopi Goldberg solution. And I think that if you're interested in maintaining... Did you catch my joke there? I took a risk. Maybe not. I think that if you're interested in maintaining the existence of the government or the federal government in the long run, then pass the basic income. I think it's good for anyone who's interested in maintaining the existence of the state. For the rest of us who are interested in ethics and replacing it, I would recommend building alternatives, seceding from the entire thing, and go our own separate ways.
Mm-hmm. All right, well, I'm going to give the last word to Emberlea, who says, what bothers me the most about libertarians is they look at the problems of society and governments typically from only an economic perspective. This fails to take into account the whole of the picture. Economics is simply a small slice of the pie, not the whole pie. And I just want to thank everybody for participating. Joel, Jonathan, Emberlea for the questions. And next week, we're going to record again at the same time. We'll be live here on Google Hangouts at 8 p.m. Eastern. And our topic is going to be intellectual property.
Cool. See ya.
All right.
See you later.